Okay, this is further information regarding the two rallies from yesterday. One in St. Louis and the second one in Chicago. They're going to go through the Chicago rally first and give you some specific information on the timeline of how things went down. And then they're going to go to the rally that was not shut down in St. Louis, but there was a lot of turmoil that occurred there as well.
We just heard from a frustrated Marco Rubio at the top of this hour reacting to the violence in Chicago last night, saying he doesn't know if he can support Donald Trump should he be the Republican nominee. NBC's Ali Vitale was in Chicago during last night's protest during that rally. MSNBC's Tremaine Lee was in St. Louis earlier in the day where protesters interrupted a Trump rally there. At least one person ended up bloodied after that one. Both of them join us live from Chicago. Now, Ali, let me start with you. Because there's been some confusion about sort of the course of events last night and when violent interactions actually started. Can you walk us through what you saw prior to the event and then when the announcement was made that it would be canceled?
Sure. So when the rally started, we looked around and you can survey the arena and kind of see where these factions were lying. If you think about how a stadium setup would be, there were sections that were literally all protesters, all groups of people who were planning on disrupting throughout the course of the rally. Interspersed with those were some supporters. And we saw throughout the course of events, as the start time was originally set to start at 6 p.m., as we saw that time creeping closer, we did see protesters and supporters begin to start clashing, whether they were screaming at each other. I know that a few protesters were escorted out before the rally even started. I remember taking this photo and tweeting a picture of this man who took a Trump sign and ripped it and kind of stood up in front of a group of protesters, and supporters were yelling at him and protesters were yelling back. So these tensions were stirring even before the rally even began, obviously escalating once the rally was canceled. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to note that what people are looking at, or what they were looking at, was Fayetteville, North Carolina, not Chicago. Now I think we're showing Chicago. I just wanted to make sure people understood that what you were describing was not what we were looking at. Go ahead, sorry.
Right. No, that's totally okay. And Fayetteville's another example of a time that we had a lot of protesters disrupting this rally. Of course, the violence that we saw there was one incident as opposed to an entire rally that kind of decimated into pandemonium. But yeah. Fayetteville was another example. And it harkens back to something that Marco Rubio said just a few minutes ago, that Chicago is not the only example here. It's not just about Chicago, is what he said. And that's true. There is a pattern here that we've been seeing, especially over the course of the past few weeks and even months, with the number of protests that we've seen at Donald Trump rallies. So this isn't something that should be taken, I don't think, as an isolated incident.
Understood. And what we're looking at now is from last night.
And that scene you just saw was protesters and supporters struggling over a Trump sign. Obviously, the protesters wanted to grab it and rip it up, and the supporters obviously didn't want to let them do that. And there was a lot of that going on, which is what helped to prompt the scuffles or fights last night.
It's down on the floor of the stadium. I don't know if you can see our air right now. Did that all happen after the announcement was made then that the rally would not happen?
Well, if I'm assuming the pictures that you're showing are what I think they are, I think that I was the one that actually took those photos, and they were happening right after the rally was canceled. An announcement came up pretty spontaneously saying that Trump had decided to cancel the rally due to safety concerns, and the entire stadium just erupted. I mean, people started chanting anything from "we did it" to pro-Bernie chants. There was a wide array of reaction, and of course, Trump supporters had their own reaction, which was obviously quite different than the protesters' reactions. So you saw immediately very visceral reactions from people in that arena.
Yeah. And Tremaine, let me...
Okay, so yesterday or last night in Chicago, number one, they basically had it in a college facility, and you know you're going to have a lot of students, etc. There, and most students or most young people, they politically lean left, and then as they get older and with more responsibilities, they move center or they move right. But in my mind, based on what I saw, you had a lot of different groups there. You had MoveOn.org there. You had Black Lives Matter movement there. You had Mexican or Hispanic groups there. Obviously, you had Trump supporters there. There had to be some white supremacists in there. You know, they don't carry signs, basically. So there were a lot of different groups that were vying. So that thing was just a powder keg, and all that had to happen was a match to be lit. And the match that was lit was Trump canceling the thing. And then that's when pretty much all hell started breaking loose across the place. Now, this next portion is going to deal with Cleveland. And I didn't see a lot of stuff that was happening with Cleveland. I had heard that there were a lot of protesters, but I didn't see a lot of footage. So this will be the first time I'm actually seeing footage of what went down in Cleveland.
Ask you about St. Louis yesterday.
I'm sorry, I keep saying Cleveland. Cleveland is tonight. This is footage from St. Louis, Missouri.
That too, it didn't bubble over in the same way. It didn't get canceled, but there was a lot of protest there.
I'll tell you what, from hours before the event was scheduled to kick off, we already saw the literal line in the sand between protesters and supporters. Police pulled out metal barricades at one point because it had gotten so chippy where a couple folks actually were squaring up to fight. And I think Marco Rubio kind of touched on something that folks on the ground have been concerned about for a very long time, that Donald Trump is tapping into this pool of anger and frustration. But the scary part is we just don't know how deep or how wide that pool is. Now, at yesterday's event, you had people who brought their children out, a lot of teenagers, college-age students, grown adults, men and women alike. And to see the response from the crowd as protesters were being dragged out of the arena, the anger, the exuberance, the chance of build that wall. It was quite frightening, actually. And when you talk to folks who've been arrested and again pulled out of that opera house yesterday, they talked about really fearing for their safety because the response from the crowd as Donald Trump is on stage saying, get a job, get him out of here. And time and again, he's referenced in not so coded language that these are very bad guys, that it's okay for them to swing on us, but when we stand up and fight back, it's a problem. And yesterday, there was another point when he said, don't worry, the police are being very gentle. You know, that's not lost on any of the protesters or any people who are going to respond to these rallies.
See, and Trump knows exactly what the hell he's doing, because that coded language bullshit basically is Trump basically calling people thugs. And we in the black community know what the word thug is code for. So, you know, you could say thug or just be real and come out and say the word that you really want to use. And then talking about getting a job, how does he know that the guy didn't have a job and was just out there protesting? See, they fall back into all these stereotypes and pretty much, I'm going to say it, attacking the black community and making us the scapegoat for all the ills of the world, you know, short of terrorism, and then they want to make every Muslim the scapegoat for terrorism, and then they want to make all the Mexicans scapegoats for cheap labor and basically being rapists. So it's coded language, but it's racially and religiously coded, you know, language that they're using to separate us. And Trump is the king of doing that, and he has tapped into the hatred and the xenophobia of the country. And basically he is saying what a lot of people are afraid to say. And that is a major problem. They talk about us being a post-racial country now that Obama was elected. No, there's nothing further from the truth. We've become more racial because you have a bunch of people who basically want to erase the fact that Obama was elected president from the history books. And in order, since they can't get at him, they basically are coming out at everybody else. And when I say everybody else, they're coming out and really going after black people. And the Mexicans are, you know, catching it too. Hispanics are catching it too. And again, you know, even some poor white people are catching some as well. But nobody is catching nearly what the black community is catching on this. So, I mean, after he leaves office, maybe this is going to calm down. But, you know, we got to get the right person in office that's going to try to get back some of what we lost. And I'm talking about rights. I'm talking about equities. I'm talking about a lot of different things.
Yeah, Tremaine, this morning, Donald Trump tweeting and calling them thugs, which is coded language as well.
Yep.
That's right. The idea of thugs, and it plays into the bigger narrative that those who are protesting this violence are concerned about. That there's not only a deeper division between people, but the us and the them. Who is the us? Who is the them? Are the them the brown people on the other side of the Mexican border? Are they the brown people who practice Islam as their religion? Is it the so-called thugs that to describe people in Baltimore and Ferguson and people have been uprising across this country for the last year and a half? And that is, again, not only concerning folks, but it's emboldening the response to the supporters who are also being whipped into this frenzy at the hands of Donald Trump.
Tremaine Lee and Ali Vitale, who covers Donald Trump for us, thank you both so much for joining us this morning from Chicago. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I hope you got at least a flavor of what was going on in Chicago and again, I apologize, St. Louis. And then I'm going to try to follow up with this all day long. Now, this is MSNBC, and quote unquote, they're supposedly left, which they really aren't. I'm going to try to check out Fox, and I know what they're going to say, but in the interest of trying to get both sides out, I'm going to see if I can pick up some information on them as well.